Hello and welcome to the Inner Sense channel. Today we have an extra special guest, Dr. Amit Goswami, whose work I became aware of many years ago and was inspired by his description of the 5 koshas meditation practice through his book, The Quantum Doctor. The practice helped me develop my own interoceptive awareness. I love speaking to Dr. Goswami in this discussion. He's now in his late 80s and is incredibly articulate and upbeat. We cover some fascinating topics, including the concept of purpose and the controversy around it in biology, as well as the idea of altruism and how a lack of it can lead to power struggles at a political scale. He's a true pioneer of interpreting quantum physics, and he served for 32 years at the University of Oregon Institute for Theoretical Physics, teaching physics. I hope you enjoy this session, and please remember to subscribe to the Inner Sense channel for more tips and hints on how to develop your own inner body awareness or interoception. Thank you very much. Welcome, Dr. Goswami, to the Inner Sense channel. I'm really grateful that you've taken time to join us. Many of our viewers will be familiar with your work, but may not know some of your personal journey and background. So please could you briefly share how you first became interested in exploring consciousness as the ground of all being?
Well, that's actually quite a long story. First of all, I was at a conference and things happened. I gave a talk, but I didn't feel good about it. And others talked, I felt they're doing much better, so I felt jealousy. So that jealousy energy eventually propelled me through the evening, and it just wouldn't stop. Then at about 1 o'clock in the morning, I go outside and intuition comes. That intuition actually was crucial to change my life. It was the question, why do I live this way? And the answer came back to back. And the answer was that I don't have to. I can integrate my life with my way of making a living. So that was crucial. After that happened, I got into, changed my field immediately, got into new research and found quantum physics eventually, became interested in the meaning of it. And that, of course, was associated also with some spiritual work that I started doing, because changing life is not just an intellectual affair. I understood that. And then what happened was also very interesting. I was not getting anywhere for 10 years of doing this, that, nothing was working. One idea came, but no more progress. And then I was talking to a mystic one day. And while the discussion got hot, because he wouldn't relent his position, and I wouldn't give up my scientific position either, that it has all to be scientific, and scientifically, we must include brain some way, because brain is crucial. And then he said something like, there is nothing but God. And that somehow broke through my dense mindset. And I made an about turn and started thinking like, okay, so what happens if consciousness is the ground of being? I immediately translated his language. That was just came automatically, smoothly. There's no thinking involved. And then I'm thinking, okay, if matter is possibilities within consciousness and consciousness chooses, then the problem is solved. So that was the breakthrough. Then it still took some time to put it together, but that was the breakthrough.
Wow, so consciousness as the ground of all being, and then consciousness chooses.
Yes, and matter has to be possibility within consciousness.
Within
The
consciousness.
breakthrough point is that, consciousness is the ground of all being is fairly common mystical statement. I mean, it has Upanishad, it has also, but one cannot do very much with it, because the challenge always has been, how does that consciousness manifest in the brain? So the crucial new insight was that matter exists in consciousness as possibilities for consciousness to choose from.
Matter within consciousness. And I also enjoyed in your books and recordings saying the term science within consciousness. So often it's, science vs spirituality, or science merging with spirituality, but you say science within consciousness.
Yes, that was the name that I preferred, actually. Now we call it quantum science because most people that I meet, and I meet many, their opinion seems like that they prefer the word quantum to be there. And then quantum science within consciousness sounds too much. And quantum science of consciousness makes sense to more people than quantum science within consciousness, although within consciousness is much more evocative, but you have to be a bit thinker to get it. Whereas science of consciousness, everybody can guess, okay, it's a theory of consciousness. So that's how the language changed a little. But I tried using science within consciousness for many years. I wrote a monograph for the IONS Institute of Noetic Sciences with that title. So it was not because of not trying. And then somehow this quantum science of consciousness became more popular, and that's the word that we normally use these days.
Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate you telling me about the conference you were at, and how it was, your evening was fueled by jealousy, and then that led you to contemplate, and you had some insight. This channel, this YouTube channel, is all about inner awareness, inner felt experience. And nearly 20 years ago, when I read your book, The Quantum Doctor, the practice of the 5 koshas, how you explained it in the book, really transformed my meditation practice. Before I read your book, my meditation practice was mostly about being aware of the mental layer of being, and watching thoughts come in like a cloud and let them do their thing. But the 5 koshas helped me to deliberately shift my attention to different channels of experience. Please, could you guide us through the 5 koshas now to help the viewers understand?
I'll be happy to. Actually, after the big discovery, the next big step was to figure out how to accommodate mind and especially feeling into the equation. Because problem was that if consciousness is non-material, as it has to be according to quantum physics, then non-material possibilities are also allowed within consciousness, for consciousness to choose from. But that idea, it's very interesting how we become so dense. So the breakthrough that occurred in 1985, that were published in 1993, it was still just matter is possibility within consciousness. The idea that non-matter also can be possibility within consciousness, it just didn't come. And then what happened was that a series of events started happening. And first of all, the Theosophists spoke to me about reincarnation. That was a big challenge. How does a person reincarnates? What actually reincarnates? So it was that very much. I saw a dream, which was very evocative. Tibetan Book of the Dead is correct. Yes. It's your job to prove it. That was the dream. And when a dream says something, you cannot ignore. So I took finding the idea of reincarnation very seriously, and that led me to the idea of subtle body. That's an Upanishadic idea, 5 koshas. That's the idea. And also I was attending a conference in India. There also I got the same message. So I started thinking, okay, so if there is 5 bodies, how to include them, non-material bodies? Then the breakthrough came again, that If matter is possibility of consciousness, why can non-matter be possibility of consciousness as well? The only thing that needed to be proven is mind and vital energy, their quantum processes. And that was not very hard to prove, because the very simple proof is that we experience matter externally, because bulk matter is Newtonian approximately. And we always experience mind and vital energy feeling internally. Why is that? One is very easily explained. If it is Newtonian, then it does not expand very much, very little. So you look at something, I look at something, we'll see this thing at the same place, because it just cannot expand as a wave very much. But for mental stuff, it's very different. They are quantum always. And so they expand very much within the split second that you are thinking and my thinking. So we never can think about the same thing in the same way. So that proof then led me to, that was the conclusion. And then what still remained a big challenge was the chakras, because in India and Tibet, people have studied these feelings for a long time. And experientially, the feelings we feel mainly shows up at 7 places in the body, called the chakra. So the big challenge was how to find an explanation of the chakras. And there again, coincidence was in a bookstore. Normally a physicist doesn't look at biology books, but I was at a bookstore, and there the books are organized in a different way, New Age books. So I was curious and looked at it, and the book that stood out was Rupert Sheldrake, A New Science of Life. So I read that, and he had the explanation of how organs are differentiated, the idea of cell differentiation. Why a cell in a different organ turns on different genes to make different proteins to allow for different functions. A toe cell will not function the same way as the brain cell functions, although both cells have the same DNA, but not all the genes are turned on, just the genes necessary for the organ function are turned on. So that idea, immediately I realized that here is the key. So consciousness needs organizing fields in order to do the differentiation in organs, find the respective function. It's a purposive function. The key thing to notice is that the hoodwinking that biologists do to all of us, they eliminate purpose, but that's not really possible. Purpose is there, it's obvious. You look at the evolutionary data, purpose is there very clearly, because the data progresses, it's progressive. Things become from simple to complex. And you look at our feelings or our thinking, we are happiest when we are thinking with a purpose. If you are thinking randomly, you will find you feel scatterbrained and you are not happy. And feeling, of course, is very purposive. I feel for somebody because I have a certain feeling about the person and I want a relationship in the future. That initiates feelings like goodness or love towards somebody. So these are all purposive experiences. To take away purpose.
I think it's very
Go ahead.
confusing for students, even for fully fledged biologists, to switch from something like the laws of thermodynamics to then talking, because all the language around biology is purposeful. So when we say, I don't know, a transcription factor migrates towards the nucleus to activate some genes for a protein to be expressed, that all is described, the story has purpose to it. Whereas, a bacterium wanting to sense a gradient of glucose and move towards the high concentration, that's the whole story has purpose entwined in it. But then we're not allowed to admit it.
Exactly. So that's the whole point. The scientist, to make his or her life simple, ignores purpose, because there is no way that purpose can be included in the Newtonian worldview. It's all cause driven. when philosophers like David Hume rediscovered causality, he never looked at Aristotelian thinking about causality. I'm sure he knew about it. Aristotle introduces final cause as purpose. But when Hume reformulated causality for us in modern times, he just simply talked about initial cause, material cause, but not final cause. That was a major omission, and we have been suffering ever since because, consensus determines a lot of how science is done. So that David Hume's philosophy of causality that influenced scientists a tremendous amount. Darwin believed in purpose, but he too bowed to causal theory because he couldn't find any way of including purpose in biology. Purposive theory in biology was Lamarckian theory. But Lamarck could not find a footing because nobody could figure out how software, which is what Lamarck was proposing. So problem was, how does purpose fit in? Only recently was I able to solve that problem. But so I was also sort of, when I introduced purpose for the first time, I was kind of, with serendipity, I was doing it. Fortunately, it all worked out.
So with purpose, I want to play around with a few words there. So purpose implies some intention, some direction, some goal. What does the word meaning mean to you? From how do we distinguish between, is it possible to distinguish between something like a thermostat, which most people will say has no intention, and something like a biological system which is regulating itself and finds meaning or significance or purpose in its environment and its internal environment?
Actually, they're quite connected because thermostat is their system, which is for a purpose, right? And so what do? We inject our purpose into the thermostat. And so we are doing that all the time. We are injecting our purpose into the machines. Computers, for example, they are purposive. We use them for purpose. Now a person can say, okay, computer, we are self-making computer, we do it ourselves. It's automatic from cause only, but that's only a way of putting it. If we realize that consciousness is the ground of being, then we can easily say that no, consciousness has to purposely make the software for this hardware that our body is to operate. So one has to recognize that all the organs, they are very much analogous to computer hardware. And then somebody has to inject purposive software in it in order to make it function. So that's what Sheldrake was actually saying, not using this language because he could not override his biological training, which does not use this language. But I was not, I was shameless because, I already broke through my physics problem of being accountable to rest of the physicists. I didn't care. So for me, it was much easier to use the purpose language.
So is the purpose truly within us, or is it at large in the universal consciousness? Is the purpose of the... Sorry?
It is in our potentiality. So we have to be a little careful because ordinarily, yes, we have some purpose that we call ego's purpose. But ego's purpose can all be explained on the basis of this concept of survival. So what the materialists did in biology very carefully, they made survival into as if it is a material property. Nobody proved it ever, no experiment could verify it, but all biologists believe that survival is somehow a material property. So survival has become a cause, you see. But actually survival, we all know how we use the language, survival is a purpose too. We can survive, most of it is, it acts like a cause, but we can also do something to do not to survive. People commit suicide. What is that? They're not doing So they are using survive very differently than ordinarily. If you say survive is a cause, then molecules would automatically do it, automatically always try to survive. So it's a complex problem for human beings to say that survive is a material property. Survival is actually a property of consciousness. Once we give up the prejudice that survival is a material property and realize that yes, there is nothing and no experimental data supporting that survival is a material property. No molecule has ever been constructed which tries to survive. So it's not a property of matter. Matter properties like mass, charge, these are properties of matter. Position, these are properties of matter. Or if you go into high energy physics, you can get many complex variables that put as material property, like color and all that crazy things that you hear about, quarks and stuff. But those are material kind. You can see that, okay, these are all material property because they are material attributes. But survival is the consciousness attribute. Matter does not try to survive. If you throw mud on a piece of glass, does the glass object? Throw the same mud on a cat, and the cat will get furious and try to shake off the mud immediately. So all living bodies have an integrity. Even single cells, we find that they have an integrity. They don't like to be loaded with other things that are foreign to it. That integrity is about the preservation of what we call, that we try to survive, that we try to make survive. But consciousness,
the physical manifestation is not persistent anyway. It's always in flux, so it's not really surviving.
Exactly. Physical manifestation of anything like rock or any inanimate object, they have absolutely, you can do anything with it, and there is no survivability. No form try to survive, but a biological form will always try to survive. That integrity of the form must not be violated. That integrity of the form is what defines the species, defines the individual body. So biology is very different. Living and non-living are very different. But of course, today we have the prejudice of molecular biology, which says biology is nothing but chemistry. So science under materialism has done really wrong with biology and psychology. It is okay for physics and chemistry because, quantum physics is probabilistic. So we never need to ask the question, what changes possibility waves into actuality? That conscious choice is involved. We never have to get to that problem. But in biology and psychology, we have single bodies. We cannot avoid it. So there we are faced with this problem. And so of course, what happened with the research that I did, initially it was all about psychology because that was easier. Biology was much more difficult. But by the time I wrote The Quantum Doctor, biology had to be handled because without biology, you cannot talk about health. So I had to deal with, unfortunately, these new discoveries of how Panchakosha can happen, how other bodies can happen, vital, mental, how they can fit in, even intuition and the idea of self. So
can we revisit the five koshas for a moment? So particularly I'd like to, so I think the viewers can look elsewhere for the description of the five koshas. I'd like to ask you to explain how you experience the supramental layer. And I know you were inspired by Sri Aurobindo as well, with the idea that the universe evolves through consciousness and that it may be possible for an increased proportion of humanity to sort of dwell or exist in a supramental consciousness.
Yes, supramental, of course, was the eventual goal, you may say. I did not immediately think of the supramental aspects except when I thought about biology. In psychology, the main focus was to understand feelings, understand the vital energies, because I'm very interested in the subject of love, because my second wife, whenever I talk to her about or use phrases like "I love you," she would always laugh and say that, "Oh, you are just saying it. You have something in mind, don't you?" And would challenge me in other times that, look, I mean, you are too cerebral. Try to learn to love from your heart. And that challenge, because my prejudice, of course, was that everything about human consciousness is in the brain. Brain does it, brain's consciousness. So from that to get into consciousness thinking, which happened in the 1990s, and then from that another jump to realize that yes, heart can also have a self. That one took a long time to recognize. So the main preoccupation was the feelings, vital energy, chakras for a long time. Within that, when I was looking at evolution, then I had to pay attention to Aurobindo's work, because the problem with Darwin's theory, as I said earlier, is that it is a causal theory. And what happens, the two mechanisms that basis of Darwin's theory, namely gene mutation and natural selection, both of those have no directionality. You can go with natural selection either in the past or in the future. So you can produce more complex or less complex. You can go either way. But it is the fact that fossil record, if you look at that, fossil record more or less on the average go from less complex to more complex. There is a clear directionality. We call it biological arrow of time. So that was very intriguing. And then I started asking question, okay, how to include purpose? And that's what led me to Aurobindo's theory, which is a clearly purposive theory. And Aurobindo says, okay, so here we are, 5 bodies, and mind gives meaning to the rest of the bodies. So he classified the 4 eras of anthropology. Now, 3 eras of anthropology, really. The 4th one is we have yet to go. And he classified them as mind gives meaning to physical, that defines the hunter-gatherers era. And then mind gives meaning to vital energy, that defines what is called the era of the garden agriculture, when we did little bitty agriculture in our backyard. And then came the heavy stuff, agricultural era. And Aurobindo says mind giving meaning to mind itself, rational thinking. And after that, only 2 things are left. One is consciousness giving meaning to intuition, and the last one is consciousness giving meaning to self. So next era, we are stuck with the rational era. And next era is the intuitive era. That has not come yet. Some of us are doing it already, but not everybody, as you can see around the world. Too much chaos. If you use intuition, we would have much less chaos. Intuition gives us the idea of peace, archetypes, our life changes. So when that happens, after that, we pay attention to the self. That's when we get into supramental. So intuition is the key transition from the self, which only handles what is mental and submental, namely feelings, sensing, feeling, and then thinking is the crucial junction point. Thinking can be intuitive thinking. Thinking also can be emotional thinking. So when we become super fine in our thinking, very creative in our thinking, we start paying attention to intuitions, and that's when we make the jump to the intuitive mind. And once we have the intuitive mind, eventually we start paying attention to the self. And that's when we become, not only we can experience supramental, intuition itself is supramental experience, but we also become a supramental self, which is based on intuition.
So the supramental self. So the journey towards supramental self, which involves intuition. I heard you sort of explaining different aspects of intuition there. What's the role for discernment there when something a feeling or an impulse or an insight comes along, and it's still, maybe there's still some choice to make. Is it, I'm feeling a certain way, it feels, there's a gut feeling, but is it indigestion, or is it
exactly. All the
is
time.
it wisdom?
Had gut feelings, and also Einstein had gut feelings. Which feeling are those for whom and what time? What's the occasion? So yeah, this is the point. I think that when Donald Trump says gut feeling, he's not talking about stomach pain. That much is sure. It's certainly his gut feeling, but it's a gut feeling of everything is right. It's going my way. That's the gut feeling. It's a narcissistic gut feeling. I got my way. That jubilation, he feels that. But he's a feeling-oriented person. The biggest attraction, of course, to Donald Trump personality, sorry for the side comment, but it is, he's oriented towards feeling. Today we live mostly in thinking, and some people rightly are not attracted to thinking so much. They are attracted to that feeling personality. Anyway, so gut feeling, yeah, but the same gut feeling, actually, whenever we engage with an archetype, whenever we have an intuition, the way to check it is either you will have a feeling in the gut, males mostly have feeling in the gut, or feeling in the heart. Females mostly have feeling in the heart. That's the confirmation of intuition. So how do you know that it's intuition versus it's simply ego, it's simply narcissism? You know by idea. Which is the idea that's coming? Donald Trump will have the idea, I have won against my enemies. Whereas the idea that will come is the opposite kind. It will come noble archetypes, noble representations. You'll have noble feelings. You'll have feelings of self-esteem instead of feeling victorious or proud about conquering your enemy. You'll have self-esteem that, yes, I can not only have power myself, but I can empower somebody else. I can
Empower
help
someone else. So again, that's sort of going back to some suggestion of purpose for on a larger scale than oneself or one's country, maybe for the planet or for humanity or for all beings.
Exactly. We are talking about expanded self, no longer just me. My purpose, ego's purpose versus a purpose that frees me from the ego. What Abraham Maslow called higher needs.
That leads me to another question I had, that maybe, I know at the Center for Quantum Activism that you do a lot on transformation, personal transformation. What does it mean from a quantum physics point of view for two quantum monads or two conscious agents who have differing reference frames, quantum reference frames, and how do they come into agreement or alignment? I'm thinking like conflict situation. What does that mean at a quantum level?
Well, you talked about alignment. Make clear. I didn't understand the question quite.
So I'm trying to think. So let's say an interpersonal issue, let's say with my family member.
We are aligned. That means we have non-local connectivity. This is how quantum physics defines alignment. We can have alignment in verbal alignment. I agree with you. We shake hands, but as you know, that has virtually no legal standing. If we make, on the other hand, an alignment non-locally, then no legal standing is necessary because we will never challenge it. So the previous cultures, they were aware of this non-local alignment agreement coming from that, where we both transcended our ego, and that's the gentle one's agreement that could not be broken. People kept, because people had those. People actually had the non-local connection before they said, okay, we agree. Whereas now, when they do it, it makes no commitment because they don't have any supramental awareness of it, no intuitive non-local signalless communication for it. They're just saying it to satisfy a particular situation. Only the situational problem being solved by agreeing, but it doesn't mean anything deeper. So today our society really has become very full of deceit, pretend. Whereas if we acted according to the intuitions, then it would be very different, because intuitions come from another domain of reality. We call that domain quantum domain of potentiality. Psychologists call it unconscious.
Mm.
When we do things only with the mind, then it basically we are using brain memory, so we don't have to invoke the unconscious for it.
Is there a relationship between this non-local agreement and sacrifice?
Yeah, exactly. So when are we able to sacrifice without duress? We are able to sacrifice when, because you and I are one. That intuitive domain. Non-local, we have become connected, correlated, entangled. That goes our quantum language. What it means is that we have become one consciousness. Consciousness mediates our connection, because no local connection, no signal connection. Who is making the connection? That connection maker is what we call consciousness. So consciousness has expanded for both of us to include the other. And therefore I can sacrifice for you because you are me. I'm just sacrificing for myself. It's nothing. I mean, when we get into that state, it's natural to be able to sacrifice.
So would you say the direction of humanity is more towards oneness?
Yes.
And what's if in the future we achieve oneness, will there be any parts left?
Well, actually, there is problems with it. I am now at the moment working on the spiritual history of humanity. And while researching on it, I've discovered something very significant that I didn't know before. I always thought that altruism is more or less a universal instinct for us. Because I always had it, I naturally assumed that every people have the impulse to help somebody in distress. And many people do, most people do. In fact, people we meet, people we talk with, they mostly would have it. So I never questioned it very much. And then when I was researching on this, it seems like human beings became different from animals only after they started a process called self-domestication. That reduced their violence toward each other somewhat, and then came altruism and really reduced the violence towards one's clan. But here's the point, here the crucial thing that did not happen. Altruism never became a total instinct. Only about 40% of us have the altruistic instinct. Rest of them, maybe 20% a bit this way, that way, but 40% approximately does not have altruism, does not have altruism. Now imagine the consequence of that. And that's the caveat, that's a big caveat. How do we train these people to be altruistic? So main barrier to our world peace is that there will always be people like Putin, people like Hezbollah. There will always be, because there are these 40% of people sitting there. 40% of 8 billion is huge, 3.2 billion. And that number of people being not having altruistic, even already, that's pretty elementary statement of compassionate, being compassionate towards another person. Altruism is elementary level of compassion.
How is that determined? Is it like a questionnaire or an assessment for altruistic features?
Well, altruistic, I haven't got into the details of the altruistic research, but I suppose they give tests simply like how does one react to a statement? Somebody is hurt. I mean, that statement make you a bit sad, or takes your energy away, or it means nothing, or you are actually glad if that person is your enemy. I mean, you can immediately see that, how people like Putin would feel. I mean, you can immediately see that. Another person's heart means nothing to them. They would easily press a trigger to a bomb that would kill thousands of people without batting an eyelash. So how is that possible? How is that possible? People who have altruism, they just possibly could not do it. Their retarded would suffer. And this difference has to be appreciated. And then we see the enormity of the challenge before us. So when a child is born, how does a parent become aware that the child does not have altruism? And then altruism can be trained very easily. And once you train the human being with altruism, then the incarnation will make sure that he carries it with him next life to next life to next life. So it should not be that much of a problem. But because it has been, because we have not been careful in finding out where is the source of so much mayhem and so much chaos in our society. Where is the source? Because majority of people, we assume the way we move around, you and I move around, we never meet these horrendously selfish people. At least, my experience is that I seldom meet them. Yes, I have met them maybe once or twice in my life. So we just assume that the world is in a certain way, but world is not in that way.
So, yeah, it's... is it possible then within consciousness that some patterns, some entities, or some conscious forms within consciousness exist that perpetuate this lack of altruism? So I'm thinking like the economy, the economic system is so strong, it's an entity in itself, and we serve the economy rather than the economy serving humans. Is it possible that this altruism is like a game theory or something that dwells within consciousness, that those people are serving the game theory?
Well, I don't think it is that way, because altruism is clearly coming from the archetype of goodness. Archetype of goodness is a well-known archetype. It is from the beginning, it is the crucial thing. When we self-domesticated, we are acting on the archetype of goodness, not to be so defensive. We gave up some defensiveness in order to be domesticated. We are not violent immediately, I see you. And then with altruism, it becomes even better. We change our response to a stranger. And a person who has altruism would not react from a stranger, even under duress, would not react necessarily negatively. We would have fear, but would not act on it. We would have anxiety, but would not act on it. So that ability is because goodness is archetypal. But again, you have to be careful, because as spiritual traditions have been saying for a long time, and religions picked up on it, they make it into dualistic. These archetypes in religion look at it in the dualistic way, good and evil. Goodness is, in religion, goodness is not looked as goodness, transcendent goodness. It's goodness split into good and evil, good as opposed to evil. So you might say that the good part is the altruistic part and the evil part is the non-altruistic part. And the way that spiritual history has evolved is a fight between good and evil. That's the description that religions give. And there is some truth to it. But is evil an entity? That is where quantum physics would differ. Evil is not an entity. So the thing is that good and evil, but is evil then an entity? Can we look at it that way? That's a little bit going too far, because we don't need to go that far. I think what we call evil is built into our collective unconscious, but it's only a tendency and only a possibility. We can choose or not choose, and does not become universal that I always choose evil. Does not become universal that I always choose good. Therefore,
Mhm.
it's an entity that is all evil and all good. And we find that. We find that evil people also have good moments. They are capable of doing good things. And their minds can be changed under suitable conditions. So that's the good part of it. And therefore, I'm confident that if we just pay attention, especially in the childhood, the evil will just not establish in the person. But if we do not careful in the childhood, then what can happen is there's disastrous. And there is some psychological story of that too, because people have looked into why people become sadist, why people become masochistic. And that all can probably all originate from this lack of altruism. That's how it begins. And then gradually it goes into those directions where you find pleasure in somebody's pain. You find pleasure in thinking of revenge. You look at how popular revenge is in Hollywood movies, and it's not just Hollywood. In every country's movies, revenge will be a major topic because many people have that. They really, when they think of revenge, they get energized.
Yeah. So this your book, this is a book you're working on now about the history of, how did you describe it?
Spiritual history of the world.
Spiritual history of the world. And when is the book due to be completed?
Well, I'm working with a co-author, Greg Kearns. So with things with co-author takes a little longer than usual. So it will be maybe another year or so, couple of years, maybe even that. But we're getting ready. Very, very, very good data we have in support of this.
Oh, I look forward to that. I'm aware we've gone over time already. We started late due to a technical delay. Is there anything?
We have 9 minutes.
5 minutes.
9 minutes, 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Oh, wonderful. So can we hear a little bit about the Centre for Quantum Activism? What other practices, sort of experiential practices, do the students use?
Yeah, we do a lot of work on, simply meditation. Meditation is ordinary people, the way we get accustomed to meditation is very simplistic. TM did that. And TM is good. I don't like criticizing other really worthwhile organizations, and TM is one. But they simplify too much. Meditation, just concentration meditation, which is what TM teaches, and they have some advanced stuff too. But even elementary, one should not just be stuck with concentration meditation, because that only improves focusing. And it does help you with the health, because it does activate the sympathetic versus parasympathetic. Ordinarily we suffer from sympathetic, and then meditation is important because it arouses the parasympathetic nerve, establishes balance. So that part is all true. So it's all good. But along with that, Buddhist practice of mindfulness meditation, then a little advanced awareness meditation, then what I call subject awareness meditation. These meditations we teach. Why? Because you get an idea of who you are. Initially, the concept of focusing, you are still focusing on the object. When you're mindful, you are still focusing on the object, but you're finding something about yourself. Okay, what do I frequently think about? So mindfulness and meditation become aware that you have become prejudiced in terms of what you think constantly. So that let you discover that, okay, there is something in you that is not quite balanced. And then next you start watching yourself. You look at yourself when you are letting the object, you are being aware of the object come into your mind's eye, object stays there, object leaves. Then who is looking? Sooner or later, you're bound to ask who is looking. And that's when you do witnessing meditation. You look at the subject that looks at the object. So these steps are very necessary in order to, there is even a basic step, which is that some of our thoughts come from the brain and we choose them on the average. We are not involved in the choice. The choice is automatic on the average. And then there are thoughts that we initiate. This is the difference that you absolutely imperative to notice, because all thought are not the same. Things that I initiate, I'm willingly initiating, that's a very much more difficult thing to stop than things that I am not initiating. I don't have to be owner to that. So the first thing we teach in terms of meditation is being non-attached to that stuff that I did not think, that I did not actively think. Carl Jung first is distinction, active thinking versus passive thinking, active imagination versus passive imagination. This distinction is very important. I am initiating. So, these are things we teach. And the next thing that we concentrate after this is done is vital energy. We really go very solidly into vital energy, chakra balancing, this kind of thing. And then only we teach them creative thinking, creative feeling, creativity, vital and mental creativity. Creativity is very basic, and the objective is for them to take every PhD student. We more or less guarantee that you will have quantum leaps. You will know exactly what quantum leaping means.
So, what is there a sort of an example?
We have done some tests. I'm very happy to tell you. A student of ours did a very good study. In fact, my collaborator, Valentina Onisar, she also got her PhD. She is a medical doctor already. And her thesis was on this. And she found that she had 40 practitioners of what she called quantum yoga. Out of these 40 practitioners, fully 30 of them got the quantum leap, 75%. That's an amazing proportion of people. And the others who didn't get, I'm sure that if they would work about 6 months more, they would have. So,
what sort of quantum leap do they have? Is it for their worldview?
Positive emotion. Basically, they're looking at an archetype and they're trying to build positive emotion. And so we are talking about earlier those feelings in the gut. So those gut feelings, if you have feelings in the navel, that's a positive emotion of self-esteem that you are discovering. If you have feelings in the heart, that positive emotion of love that you are discovering. If it is a feeling in the brow chakra, in your head, then what you are discovering is clarity of thinking. So these are all quantum leaps. Thinking with clarity is what Saint Bonaventura called contemplation. That's the Christian word for contemplation. And the third eye of contemplation, that's what opens when you take a quantum leap of the brow chakra. And students had a variety of quantum leaps, some in navel, some in heart, some in the brow.
That's incredible, 75%. And is it? I guess it's sustained. Is it? Is it sustained for a long period of time? Once they've leaped.
It was 16 months. It was 16 months of three 6 months period, 18 months. They went through pretty rigorous. Our PhD students, it's not only a thinking education, it's also a transformative education. This is a 5-year program that they do. And so it was part of that program.
I imagine that 75% would outperform a lot of medication.
Yeah, well, as I said, those three aspects. Initially, the preparatory meditation for thinking, and then a lot of yoga, and those are for the vitals, for feeling. Yoga, pranayama, qigong, those three. And then only you get into the creative do. That's our creativity one. Yes, we adopted jingle because it's alternative preparation and incubation or unconscious processing. So partly you are working on Newtonian way of thinking, one level thinking, and then you are allowing it to go to the unconscious, make it a 2-level thinking, unconscious and conscious both. And this do and be, this 2-level thinking does the job so much faster and better than 1-level thinking, which is what scientific method and all these other things that scientists do. But artists knew long before science came along that that's not how creativity works. It's a two-level thing.
I greatly appreciate the time you've given. I'm aware we're nearly up to the extra minutes you've given. Just a closing question before, well, I'd like you to tell people where they can find out more about your work. But before that, do you have any challenges you see for the field of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, or consciousness research? There's been several bold researchers speak up recently in support of your idea that consciousness is the ground of all being. It seems like we're at a turning point, but what's left to be done? What's left to be discovered?
Well, look, the people mainly are struggling with the basic questions of consciousness, unfortunately. They're trying to explain qualia, something like qualia. And good thing is that at least now they have realized that computer models don't work. So scientific materialism is now more or less agreed is dead as far as consciousness research is concerned. But people are still stuck with that one level thinking. Their thinking is panpsychism. That's the assumption that everything in the world is conscious. Not only their matter, but it's also conscious in addition. What does that mean? How does the consciousness of electron differ from the consciousness of a chair, differ from consciousness of a human being? That's something that will be figured out in the future. That's the hope. But why go all this way when quantum physics is clearly showing us the avenue? If you put a two-level reality, if we impose consciousness, can stay in two states, unconscious and conscious, aware and unaware. If we think this way, which psychologists have accepted long ago, I mean, at least depth psychologists and transpersonal psychologists, if this simple thing is accepted, then consciousness, most of problems of consciousness disappear. There are, of course, details. What we need most is the details of neuroscience with consciousness, so that if we have this experientially, these very unusual states of consciousness that brings us happiness and intelligence, we have huge data for this in both modern psychology and also spiritual traditions, historical work. We have tremendous amount of data of people of very advanced consciousness. So what is the idea of why science should concentrate on? Science should concentrate on getting neuroscience correlate of these wonderful states so that they become more and more available to ordinary people. This is a major problem. I think that much work in this direction would really be appreciated. I sometimes always look forward to new neuroscience data. By the way, all the ideas that we are talking about, most of them have been verified by neuroscience already. So that is a very good thing. The idea of vital energy is now totally scientific. We have apparatuses that can measure vital energy. We have apparatuses, fMRI, which can measure mental thought. So we have really made progress in terms of measurement, and that progress has to continue. This is the wonderful thing to look forward to. As far as the intricacies of consciousness, unless we start to say that scientists, you start thinking about how to experience these higher states of consciousness. Give up that reluctance, and once you start experiencing these higher states of consciousness, you would have no doubt that it is two-level. And once you have that, then you can work towards some very exalted state about which you need to find out a lot. For example, Indians, and they are practically the only one, a few others too, Jesus Christ, for example. But the idea of nirvikalpa samadhi, about samadhi, peak experiences that Maslow also talked about. But nirvikalpa samadhi is samadhi without separateness. A samadhi in your unconscious. Now, this is a very intriguing concept because in the unconscious, there is no separateness. But how can we have then a recollection that I had something? So I have a theory of that, tentative theory, which on the basis of something that we call delayed choice experiment, it is an experimental idea that quantum science has, theoretically quite justified. But there can be other models that will make it easier to partake for ordinary people. So I think these are the directions that people should go to, not the silly idea that it's panpsychism or it is, Spinoza had the idea of pantheism. It's not like that. They don't solve problems.
Oh, thank you for making that distinction between panpsychism and your view of the two levels. So, what is the best website or location for people to find out about your work?
Yes, it's amitgoswami.org. AmitGoswami.org. AmitGoswami.org will have it all. And if you go to that website, you'll find another website where all the details of this graduate program, master's and PhD that I mentioned, all these details are there. And we certainly appreciate appearing on this show. And hopefully a few people will look up the website and find our program. And then I will have the pleasure of teaching you directly some of this stuff that I was talking about.
Incredible. I'll put the links for those two sites on the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goswami. And I really look forward to seeing the new book when it's finished in maybe a year or two's time.
Okay.